Give us a wave, Boris. Yeah. To British people.
Okay. Keep going till June the 23rd, I know.
The Brexit referendum campaign. Brash. High octane. Occasionally bizarre.
Nigel, you're a fraud.
It divided a nation.
We're full! We're full! We are full!
Then changed it. And it was euphoria or despair.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it.
In the wake of this enduring political earthquake.
The sun has risen on an independent, united kingdom.
Now, amidst mounting talk of a second referendum, we delve back into the first, into the world of Arron Banks, the Leave campaigner's biggest donor, glimpsing the methods of the man with the money and exposing his group's tactics after the murder of the Labour MP Jo Cox in the final week of the referendum.
I haven't got any words to describe how I feel about that. No. That is horrible. That is so horrible.
We've been shown email correspondence and invoices never previously made public, which take you inside Arron Banks' campaign during the referendum. Documents rich in tactics and spending trails. It's clear from them how wide his influence extended across other Leave campaigns. But did rules to ensure a fair referendum get broken in the process? It's referendum result day, and alongside Nigel Farage is his old ally and self-appointed guard dog, Arron Banks. They weren't the official Leave campaign.
Do you think we can do it? I think we can do it.
Losing that bitterly fought contest to vote Leave, and with it, a £7 million spending limit. Instead, Arron Banks and his group Leave.eu had a £700,000 limit, 99% of which they declared they'd spent. The Electoral Commission, whom Banks derides as Muppets, has already fined his group for breaching their spending limit. But was there more? A way to get around the rules by using other campaigners. In one email, we've seen a colleague suggest to Mr. Banks potentially helping a small number of groups to raise their funding. Using them, he goes on, could take our activities from a £700,000 cap to a £5 million cap. And if he did use any such groups, was one of them Labour Leave? But first, UKIP, and Nigel Farage in May 2016 unveils his new battle bus.
No, it's not.
Soon to tour the UK to the theme tune of The Great Escape. It became one of the defining images of the referendum. It's all UKIP colours and slogans. But the hidden hand of Arron Banks and Leave.eu was never far away, it seems. Right down to arranging the bus hire and designing its look. Now, of course, we know Arron Banks and his Leave.eu group were close to Nigel Farage and UKIP. Both men are great friends, and here they were, after all, on the same side, campaigning for Brexit. Nothing wrong with that. However, if two campaign groups spend money as part of a coordinated plan or arrangement, then rules apply. Each has to tell the Electoral Commission and declare the total sum of those joint costs, because if they don't...
The concern is there's a hidden funder of the common plan expense activity that is at or near its expense limit, but has lots of cash to spend. If it can do that by funding the activity of the other organisation that makes the declaration and is in a position to declare that money because it's not at its limit, it's found a way to evade the limits on its own expenditure.
And cheat the system.
And cheat the system.
In emails we've seen planning UKIP's bus tour, it's a Leave.eu staff member who emails the bus company in UKIP, attaching the image we'd like featured, and asking for the words, "Make June the 23rd our Independence Day," added to the back. Arron Banks himself at one point instructs, the UKIP logo needs to be put at the back in small letters. Emails suggest Banks personally signed off over £50,000 for UKIP's bus tour, that Leave.eu sent staff to work on it, authorised payments for additional drivers, and yet no joint spending was declared. Only UKIP reported the costs. Are you surprised by that?
Yes, I'm very surprised by that. On the evidence that I've seen, it is at least, on the face of it, at least common plan expenses that should have been declared by both participants in the arrangement. It would, of course, be much more serious if it was, in fact, all Leave.eu's expenditure and didn't appear anywhere in their return.
But Arron Banks, of course, wasn't just funding campaigners on the right. He very publicly courted the left too, convinced that Labour voters were key to winning the referendum. And among those who eagerly embraced his patronage were campaigners from the group called Labour Leave. In the referendum's memorable, at times farcical, Battle of the Thames,
All right, guys.
with Nigel Farage was Arron Banks and Kate Hoey, one of several Eurosceptic Labour MPs who made up Labour Leave.
I have never met anyone who is more determined to get our country out of the European Union as Arron.
A pro-Brexit group not affiliated to the Labour Party, but chaired at the time by Labour donor John Mills, who claimed they'd mobilised over 140,000 supporters.
The Remain campaign is financed by big business to the tune of millions.
But Labour Leave doesn't have anything like the level of financial support. Today I'm asking you for your support.
They appeared alongside other Leave groups, their website proclaiming their campaign to be independent, funded and staffed by Labour, trades unions and Socialist Society members. Yet evidence we've seen suggests key Labour Leave figures were paid by Arron Banks' organisation, including General Secretary Brendan Chilton, Director of Strategy Nigel Griffiths, and Head of Media Ollie Hewitson. Mr Hewitson and Mr Griffiths told us they'd expected the payments to be properly declared. Brendan Chilton declined to comment. Their Westminster office was paid for also by an Arron Banks company, which, we've discovered, Labour Leave didn't declare properly. And this, we can reveal, is now the subject of an investigation by the Electoral Commission. We have Labour Leave team members apparently being paid by Arron Banks, your office and facilities provided by him. Why was none of this ever properly declared?
Well, it was declared. The office was declared.
But it wasn't declared properly, was it?
No,
the Electoral Commission?
It was declared subsequently. There was a mistake made on the bureaucratic of over timing, but it was certainly declared to the Electoral Commission.
What about the team payments? Those weren't declared properly, were they?
The only responsibility I took was was expenditure that was authorised by Labour Leave, that was in our budget, that was where we had the money in the bank, and we were sure that we were not exceeding the expenditure limit.
So you're saying you couldn't have declared it because you didn't know it was happening?
That's correct.
Again, Labour Leave and Leave.eu never declared any working together costs, which is odd given the apparent coordination witnessed in the emails. In one exchange, John Mills from Labour Leave suggests costs for print invoices totalling nearly £9,000 are split between Labour Leave and Leave.eu. Arron Banks replies, that's fine.
What was agreed, he'd pay his costs and we'd pay our costs. Is that joint working? It doesn't sound like joint working to me.
Numerous emails show members of Labour Leave asking Leave.eu for funding, social media help, for travel and hotel expenses to be approved, campaign materials too. Do you think the Electoral Commission and your 140,000 Labour supporters, as you claim, had an accurate picture of the true relationship between Arron Banks and Labour Leave?
I think they thought that Labour Leave was an entirely separate organisation.
I'm just asking you, do you think they got an accurate picture?
Yes, I think they did.
The Electoral Commission?
I think they did. And I think the idea that he was sort of in the sort of puppet master running us all was completely a fabrication, not true.
So you don't accept that he had any influence, exerted any influence on your organisation?
Well, of course he must have had some influence, but a tiny, tiny amount. What we were our own people, we ran our own ship, we had our own money, he did not provide any cash for us at all. He may have employed some of the people that we did and paid them, but they were separate from anything that was authorised expenditure by Labour leave.
A term which he claims became generic for Labour Brexiteers. And then came the murder of Jo Cox. In the aftermath of the Labour MP's death, just a week before the vote,
Both sides in the bitter referendum campaign have suspended their activities tonight.
emails the following morning show Leave.eu figures debating how Labour Leave should respond. A draft press release condemns the media as deplorable for making political mileage for Remain from Jo Cox's death. Blackmailing Brexiteers to tone down their campaign is a new low, it says. One Leave.eu figure suggests altering the wording. I think it also needs more about being a time for showing respect, he writes, and drawing unsubstantiated inferences about motive or causes at such a time is disrespectful to Jo Cox's memory. But Leave.eu's Andy Wigmore replies, no, don't need to say this. Her husband has already made it political. The tone is about right. Arron Banks is shown the draft release in Labour Leave's name. Much better for them to do it, he says. Labour Leave would later condemn the statement, claiming it had been issued falsely in their name.
I haven't got any words to describe how I feel about that. It's that Brendan would make political capital about his wife being murdered on the street immediately after her death. Why would anybody suggest that?
You're shocked to hear about this?
Yeah.
Arron Banks, whose group claimed to have paused campaigning, but who in private, the morning after Jo Cox's death, the emails show, is urging his team to bolster spending on what appears to be an existing social media campaign video. Keep pumping the McKenna video, he says, and up the spend. Leave.eu's CEO writes, with no active campaigning, it could get a lot of take-up today. Exactly, Banks replies, press it harder. Adding later, boost it more. The ban is on new stuff and activity, not the sponsored page.
At the centre of this was a colleague of mine with a young family who was murdered doing her job. Why would you use that to benefit your campaign? You know, there've got to be limits. And it seems to me that the way in which these people operate, there are no limits.
Not my style. Not my style.
Was Arron Banks not your style?
Well, I think some things that Arron Banks did weren't my style. No, that's absolutely correct.
And yet you seem quite collegiate with him during the campaign.
We were thrown together. I mean, we were on the same side in the campaign. I mean, this is true of all the other organisations that are involved in the campaigning. This is the way politics works.
The leaked emails raise other serious questions about possible undeclared spending. When UKIP's Nigel Farage attended this rally in Gateshead, he got here, we can reveal, by private jet, it seems, and paid for by the Banks organisation. Invoices we've seen suggest they paid almost £12,500 for the flight, signed off by Arron Banks, the campaigner who framed Brexit as a war on the elite. But nowhere can we find this cost declared to the Electoral Commission. And if it wasn't declared?
And if it wasn't declared, then there is a breach of the Act and possibly a criminal offence as well.
On both sides of the referendum campaign there were breaches. But it's Arron Banks who's still being investigated over the source of the millions he ploughed into the referendum. As for Leave.eu, the pro-Brexit movement he claims made history, their guerrilla war, as Mr. Banks previously described it, seemingly continues, now urging supporters to try to get pro-Remain Tory MPs deselected. Underestimating me, he once wrote, is a big mistake.
Andy Davis is with us now. Andy, have we heard anything from Mr. Banks himself?
Not Mr. Banks, but from his associate Andy Wigmore, who tweeted within the last hour that our use of these emails was selective and misleading. But No substantive response. We wrote to Mr. Banks on Wednesday, setting out our findings and inviting him to respond in time for yesterday's programme. He said he needed 5 days or so to assess the volume of material in our letter. We extended the deadline to today. He said he needed more time, so we haven't heard from him. UKIP have issued a statement saying that private jet trip by Nigel Farage wasn't a UKIP expense, wasn't organised by UKIP, wasn't paid for by them. We've had a statement also from Jo Cox's husband, Brendan Cox, this evening. He said, "It's sad and disappointing that at a moment when the country was united in profound shock, a handful of people were seeking to take political advantage of her killing. This isn't a reflection on Brexit or Brexiteers, it's a reflection solely on the people involved."
What next?
There is an ongoing investigation involving Mr. Banks, who, of course, I should say, has always denied any wrongdoing. But this is a National Crime Agency investigation, which we understand is looking into whether he is the true source of the donations and loans made during that campaign. So that's where the focus is at the moment, and we await any developments in that case.
Andy Davies. Well, now, we showed his film to Labour MPs Alison McGovern and Jess Phillips, who were both friends of the murdered MP Jo Cox. This was the first time either of them had been aware of Arron Banks' role in campaigning at the time of their friend's death. After watching our report, I began by asking them what they thought of the emails that were sent on the day after Jo died.
Watching that just makes me feel sick. The day Jo was killed, I mean, that was the worst day of it's one of the worst days of my life, definitely the worst day ever in my political life. And to think that that was a discussion that was going on makes me deeply upset.
In that moment, after Jo's murder, there was Banks saying, "We've got to press harder."
God, if I'd had any idea, I would have really gone to town, because we were trying to focus on this woman, a brilliant woman who we had lost in the worst way. And we were trying to focus on what was good about her life. And there is somebody saying, what can I gain from this?
I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about Arron Banks. He's thinking about how he can play the angles. Push it harder after a national crisis like that.
I'm just wondering whether you feel the Electoral Commission have really been anywhere near any of this.
Oh my goodness, the Electoral Commission have to, I think, do so much more to demonstrate that they have control of this situation. I mean, in some ways, I have sympathy if the problem is they don't have enough teeth, maybe, but clearly there's a whole issue here that we're only beginning to understand. This won't just stop here. This could affect every democratic event in the future. And we have got to get control of what's going on here.
The painful conceit to me is the idea that these campaigns were being fought by passionate working class people against an elite, when actually what you have is a multi-millionaire with absolutely no heart, no feeling. Doesn't matter who he takes down. There is nothing about my community that Arron Banks represents.
If Arron Banks was breaching the rules and pulling the strings, what should happen?
The Electoral Commission have got to throw the book at him and be able to do so. I think everybody's concerned that they simply don't have enough power, and the Prime Minister's got to make sure that this can be fully investigated and the most significant penalties be levied.
So there's a sort of local Labour stalwart denying that there was any influence on their campaign from Mr. Banks. What do you think?
I think John Mills, it's clear that there was involvement, and I think, I really wish in British politics people could admit when they'd done something wrong. It's very clear from the evidence that Arron Banks was involved in a Labour Party campaign, and frankly, I think the Labour Party should take that incredibly seriously and sever their ties with those people.
Given that there was only a 4% difference between Leave and Remain, is it a safe result?
people watching will be able to say, oh, well, you know, they voted Remain, they're just bitter. I actually am much more interested in the facts than what I can lay over them for my own political opinion. I want to know the facts because I want to know what happened over those weeks and months. And if something happened that wasn't fair, we deserve to know about that. And if something happened where another state actor was involved in our democracy, that is so deeply serious that no, you know, a select committee with the greatest will in the world, we need a Mueller-style inquiry into this. And Theresa May needs to make clear that she is also interested in the facts. This isn't about he said, she said. This isn't about Remain versus Leave. This is about the fundamental principle of our democracy.